Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Let There Be Light. Let There Be Light is a fireside chat brought to you by Akinwunmi and Busari legal practitioners, the foremost law firm in Lagos, Nigeria. On the show, we talk about the electricity markets in Nigeria, with primary focus on the Electricity Act 2023. We've had previous episodes, special guests talking about different areas of the market, the financial, policy, and as well as regulatory. On today's episode, we have a very special guest, the founding partner of Akinwunmi and Busari legal practitioners, the founder leading the energy and power team of the firm, an expert of business recovery and insolvency, which has led him to many power and energy advisory and consultations. He is also a man of many parts, being the former vice president of the Nigerian Football Federation and a philanthropist with two charities under his management, the Seyi Akinwunmi Charity Foundation and Courage Education Foundation. When we return, we will go into discussions with Mr. Seyi Akinwunmi.
Welcome to the Let There Be Light Fireside Chat series, where we will shine the spotlight on the people, policies, and progress shaping Nigeria's power sector. Over the past few episodes, the focus has been on renewable energy, electricity, infrastructure, the emergence of state electricity markets, and the impact of the Electricity Act 2023 on sector reform. Each conversation has brought us deeper into the opportunities and challenges that define Nigeria's evolving electricity landscape. And now we are on episode 6, where we'll be focusing on the structural development and the establishment of the Nigerian Independent System Operator, also known as NISO. NISO was carved out under the Electricity Act 2023 to take over grid operations from the Transmission Company of Nigeria, with the aim of creating a truly independent, transparent, and efficient system operator. When we talk of independence, what we're focusing on is 1. Who governs NISO? 2. What checks and balances guarantee accountability? And in this episode, we unpack the governmental framework of NISO's operations, the board composition, regulatory oversight, and positioning in the electricity value chain. And so if you are a policymaker, an investor, energy professional, or simply passionate about the electricity industry, you don't want to miss this. So stay with us, share, like, and subscribe for more insightful conversations.
Welcome back, and welcome, Mr. Seyi Akinwunmi.
My pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Yes. So we talk about the Electricity Act 2023. It was enacted and signed into law in 2023. However, in the first half of 2024, there was an unbundling of TCN, the Transmission Company of Nigeria, which led to a new company called the Nigeria Independent System Operator, NISO. What exactly is NISO?
Well, NISO, as you said, is the Nigeria Independent System Operator. It's it works behind the scenes to ensure that power is generated, transmitted, and distributed across all parts of Nigeria. If you look at it as the organizer or the controller of our system, electricity system, then you'd be right. And I'll give you an analogy. Imagine that the power is a vehicle, and that vehicle was driven onto the main roads to get to various parts of the country. And when you get to those parts, you go into side roads. So the vehicle is the electricity itself which is generated. The main roads and the broad streets are the transmission lines, and the side roads are the distribution lines that gets to power to you and I. So it's like a traffic controller of all our electricity. It looks at the system of operations of our electricity, but it also deals on the market side. So the market operator, it's also a market operator. So it deals with the sale of power between the generating entities and the sellers, i.e. the distributors.
So we had TCN, and now we have NISO. Do both entities still exist?
Yes, they do. They both exist. NISO itself was creation of the unbundling of TCN. TCN, which is Transmission Company of Nigeria, used to be the one that did everything that had to do with the control of the grid, to the administration of the network itself, and also all the things that NISO is meant to do. A lot of people felt that it was burdened or overburdened, and that's probably the reason why we went with what's happening globally, where you have an independent system operator focused essentially on doing that which it's meant to do in terms of organizing and administering the markets, as well as administering the system itself. So leaving TCN to just focus on the infrastructure itself. Yeah.
So what is the legal framework for NISO? How did it come to be? From the legal perspective, you're a lawyer, so from the legal perspective, take us through how it came to be, how was it established?
Yes, the Electricity Act clearly states that TCN needed to be unbundled, and that NISO needs to be created and also incorporated. But don't forget that we have the Nigerian energy policy, we have the Constitution, we have the Corporate and Allied Matters Act. All of this impacts NISO, because NISO is, as I just alluded to, an incorporated body. It was incorporated, I think, in May last year, 2024, and therefore it is governed by the rules and governance structures and the corporate governance codes and all of those. But also, even though the Act reinforces its independence as an entity, NERC, that's the Nigerian Electricity Regulation Commission, also has regulations, and those regulations are what really backs up the operation of NISO, because it is that body that oversees and that has an oversight function over NISO. The other thing we must be very clear about is that the law recognizes NISO as an independent, quasi-autonomous operator within the sector, because it is independent, because it must ensure that all the various parties within that sector do what they're meant to do within the law and within the guidelines, and ensure that there's a balance in the production of electricity and also the distribution of electricity. So if, for example, we have too much power, that car I alluded to will crash. But if we don't have the car at all, then everybody's stranded. They have to start walking very long distances to get to where they want. It's the same thing with power. So they have to ensure that that balance is there, and at all times everything works. So we don't have blackouts over time. I mean, it's not there to replace the power holding company or all that, but as far as the grid is concerned, to ensure that it works. For example, we have now where something happens with the grid, everything just shuts down. But those things can be isolated, and something wrong with the grid can be isolated and repaired. That's the job of what NISO will be looking at.
Based on your responses, we had TCN, and with the Electricity Act and with the directive in the Act that NISO needed to be independent by first half of 2024, we then had the unbundling. So we now have TCN focusing on transmission infrastructure, and the NISO, focusing on system operators and system operator functions. But you also mentioned that we have NERC, as regulatory oversight. So what do you think, how do you think all of this impacts the independence of NISO? In the sense that, do you think there are any legal ambiguities or operational factors that affect how NISO will operate?
No, I think that, the law is pretty clear. NISO is distinct from this TCN, even though they sort of collaborate and work hand in hand. Under the current legal framework, it functions as an independent entity responsible solely for system operations and grid management is clear. TCN, as you said, is responsible for the infrastructure, transmission of the electricity infrastructure itself. But as I just said now, they have to work hand in hand and work closely. But I think that more effort needs to be made to clearly delineate their roles to avoid overlaps. And I think it's been done. And I say this because, some staff of TCN have to move and are moving to NISO. And TCN has been around for a very long time. So the mindset change might be a bit difficult for some. So there has to be training, of course. But those sort of things are important. The unbundling is a significant step, really, towards liberalizing the Nigeria's electricity market. And the idea is to create a more competitive and efficient market. So while we've made a lot of progress in a short time with the coming on board of NISO, there has to be a lot more done, to show the distinction between NISO and TCN to the public. So the issue of delineation of its powers and its functions as distinct from TCN and other must be clear to other market players. So I think that there was just more effort made to articulate this to the market and to ensure that there's no ambiguity and we are legally protected by law and they're aware of it. So we must ask that NISO goes out and speaks about what it's doing a lot more. I think though, because they're new, relatively, the board was just inaugurated, I think, in April this year. They're probably doing what I think is right, getting themselves together in-house before coming out.
On today's episode, for those of you just joining or if you're just catching on, we're talking about NISO, the Nigeria Independent System Operator, and we have as our guest, a very special guest, Mr. Seyi Akinwunmi, founding partner of Akinwunmi and Busari Legal Practitioners. Leading to my next question about the autonomy and independence of NISO, I guess that before the public is very much aware of the independence and how different it is from TCN, internally, there have been some restructuring in terms of how it is governed. So what is known about NISO's governance?
Well, I think it's clear in the Act what NISO's governance structure is. It speaks to the board and what the board members need to be. We know that Section 30, subsection 2, speaks about having an independent chairman, having an MD, managing director, who's had 10 years. In fact, the 10 years criteria sort of runs through the entire board. So there must be deep knowledge of what they're doing. But one of the major things, and then we also have somebody from the Ministry of Power, who is not less than a director level. But I think one of the things that is crucial for it to work is the delineation of power, in separation of roles rather, in the board between the CEO and the chairman in particular. Whilst it's a fundamental governance principle, because where there's an oversight, then there's transparency, there's organization, And, there's a lot more progress that can be made on the board. So the governance structure of NISO, I think, will be what will make it or break it. And I think that because of the caliber, first of all, the type of people that have to be on the board, you have people from Ministry of Power, as I said, you have market operator, you have a system operator, you have representatives of the generating companies, of the distributing companies, of the transmission company. There's different perspectives. And if I may, I'd like to speak to the current board because, I've perused the act and I've looked at who were actually put on the board. And I think that, as a friend of mine said to me recently, that we must commend whoever put together this list. From the chairman, who is a legal practitioner and who has also been in the international financial world, he has a broad scope. Like the MD, the fact that the MD has also been across board. He's worked at NERC, he's been in distribution, he's been in generation, so he understands what's at play. So the governance structure of having the market operators and the system operator within that board and having independent directors representing other stakeholders, I think it tells a good story about the board. Now, as far as the independence is concerned, the important thing is not just its independence, but also that there's proper oversight of NISO. That's where NEC comes into play. There has to be oversight. Otherwise, perhaps we won't have as much transparency or efficiency as we could have. And I'm talking, many years down the line, so not necessarily to this board. So we really need to look at how do we ensure that the board is able to have a strategic direction, ensure that its policy formulations and its operational oversight is very tight and very efficient. So I don't know if that answers your question as to what it entails and what it should be. But yes, I think its independence is pretty clear. There are some challenges, but I'm sure we'll come to that.
Yes, that answers the question. It answers it very well. For the purpose of those watching, I would just like to point out that NERC, that Mr. Seyi Akinwunmi referred to, is the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission, which is the regulatory commission that basically sits at the top, the national level. That leads me to the mindset that we have. I feel like I have that mindset sometimes. And I think that if you ask Nigerians randomly, they would tell you that, well, sometimes when a company that serves the general public, right, and could also have impacts from the private sector is handled by the government, there's always challenges. We know that, NISO has come to stay. NISO is independent, talking about the governance structure, the board composition. However, there's still that regulatory oversight that NERC has. So what challenges do you think that NISO would face being a government-created agency?
Yeah, I think, as you rightly pointed out, generally government agencies, when created, the first issue that comes up is political interference, and then resource constraints, where do we get the funding from to do all we want to do? There's so much we can do, but really, we don't have the money for it. Let's get up to this point and then we can raise money and all that. So what you need to do now sometimes is deferred because there's not enough money. Then you also have this problem of overlapping responsibilities with other government agencies. For example, as we spoke about now, overlap with CCN. Where's the clear delineation? Do I have the competence to be totally extricated from relying on TCN's competence. Do I have competence in-house? And those issues are quite deep. First thing is, look, where do you get the funding from? And funding is a way of manipulating, and I'm not saying there's any manipulation here, but of manipulating a body into doing your bidding. Look, if you have this, it's a bit of carrots dangled, we need you to go this way, and, there's this funding coming, and you sort of sway towards that. And then there's also the issue of political interference. Incidentally, I spoke with one of the board members of NISO recently, and I said, how come, you're very lucky, and although I think you're a good appointment, the president, must have been very impressed with you. What do you think of him? And he says, I never met the president before I was appointed. He didn't ask to see me. And since I've been appointed, I haven't seen him, and he has not asked to see me. And this is 2 weeks or so ago. So it tells you that, at least from that bit of news, it tells me there's no political interference. And indeed, I must say that the way the Electricity Act has been implemented thus far, it seems to me as if there's a genuine intention to ensure that it works. In terms of resource constraints, I guess maybe one day when we get the MD of NISO here to speak with us, we'll be able to tell us whether there are resource constraints. I'm not competent to speak with that. But the overlapping responsibilities, particularly with TCN, is something real. And also, the implementation of the Act, given where we are now, in terms of devolution of power, regulatory power to the states, is something that interface has to be worked, and that road walks before we can actually tell what we think is happening with NISO.
That's a lot to take in. I think we should take a break here, and then we'll come back to how NISO would play side by side with the states. We have been speaking with Mr. Seyi Akinwunmi, the founding partner of Akinwunmi and Busari Legal Practitioners, and the firm that actually sponsored this show. We'll be back shortly.
Welcome to the Let There Be Light Fireside Chat series, where we will shine the spotlight on the people, policies, and progress shaping Nigeria's power sector. Over the past few episodes, the focus has been on renewable energy, electricity, infrastructure, the emergence of state electricity markets, and the impact of the Electricity Act 2023 on sector reform. Each conversation has brought us deeper into the opportunities and challenges that define Nigeria's evolving electricity landscape. And now we are on episode 6, where we'll be focusing on the structural development and the establishment of the Nigerian Independent System Operator, also known as NISO. NISO was carved out under the Electricity Act 2023 to take over grid operations from the Transmission Company of Nigeria, with the aim of creating a truly independent, transparent, and efficient system operator. When we talk of independence, what we're focusing on is 1. Who governs NISO? 2. What checks and balances guarantee accountability? And in this episode, we unpack the governmental framework of NISO's operations, the board composition, regulatory oversight, and positioning in the electricity value chain. And so if you are a policymaker, an investor, energy professional, or simply passionate about the electricity industry, you don't want to miss this. So stay with us, share, like, and subscribe for more insightful conversations.
Welcome back. You're still watching Let There Be Light, brought to you by Akinwunmi and Busari. And our guest today is Mr. Akinwunmi himself, Mr. Seyi Akinwunmi, the founding partner of Akinwunmi and Busari Legal Practitioners. Prior to the break, Mr. Akinwunmi spoke about how the independence of NISO has been created, established, and also clearly stipulated by the Act. He has also mentioned that the board composition that we have, is a solid one. So if Mr. Seyi Akinwunmi says it, I believe it. But now let's talk about the states. We all know that the Electricity Act has allowed states to regulate their own market, to create their own market, basically. So how do you think, or what should we expect from NISO in terms of the subnational play and the subnational market?
Well, I think that, it's tough for NISO because they're new and they still have to come into play at the national level. And then to come and expect them to also play at the subnational, I think it's tough. But I think when tough times come, tough institutions deal with them. So it's come at a time where it has to adapt to a more decentralized market structure, to take on broader operational planning and facilitation roles. I think it has to, in preparing, and maybe it's a good thing, that it's preparing itself to take on national, and the subnational has come into play. So it can plan all at the same time. Enhance governance, planning, increase stakeholder engagement, going to the various states, strengthen capacity to deal with more complex, and multi-entity institutions. So maybe it's a good thing that it's coming at this time where it has to adapt itself to be able to do all of this at the same time where it's adapting itself to do for the national as well. It has to find a way to facilitate subnational market integration, and not forgetting that there, at subnational level, there are different challenges in different states. Lagos certainly is different from those states, and that's again is different from Abia or Enugu, and different from Jos. So there are various things they have to look at. What the challenges you have in rural areas is different from that you have in the city centers. And then there are various issues that they have to deal with. But I have no doubt that one of the things that came into the minds of those who drafted the law in putting up together the board and the diverse membership was one of these things. Because I know that, for example, there's somebody who represents the discos in there, someone that's generating companies in there. So there are various people who understand the market. But we also need to understand that with the state powers coming into play, there is cross-border between states, or there will be cross-border operations. So they also have to develop infrastructure to support such decentralized markets. Then we then have to look at the bilateral relations, because we can also have people distributing outside of Nigeria. So you're moving from centralized day-ahead operations to a bit longer based contract situations. So NISO has to develop the tools to accommodate multiple, possibly fragmented trading environments. And I think that is the key. So it's really an issue of adapting, learning from established markets, established ISOs across the world, and adapting that to Nigeria's situation, but also adapting to the new situation where we have subnational entities to deal with. Luckily, it really needs to deal. Its primary function is the grid management, as far as that's concerned, and grid dealings, not private sector, especially smaller ones in the states. So leave the states to do those off-grid ones and the smaller ones, and focus on the big picture.
Yes, I guess there's a lot to look forward to.
Yes, I think things are changing daily. I was in one of the states just yesterday and the day before yesterday, talking about open access, open about distribution changes, I also sit on the committee in one of the states looking at how we can develop a new direction for its distribution of power and ensuring that power gets to the nooks and cranny of that state. So there's a lot to look forward to, and it's dynamic. So we need to keep up, and day on day something new comes, which is why we are having this fireside chat from time to time, so that we can let people know what to think, what to expect, and know what's going on now.
Ladies and gentlemen, if Mr. Akinwunmi said that the intentions of the Electricity Act is genuine, I believe him. If he says that the constitution of the board of NISO is solid, I believe him. If he says that there's a big picture and there's a lot to look forward to, I believe him, and you should believe him too. Let me know what you think about this episode. Drop your comments, your questions, if you have any. And to the final question, if you were to describe the Electricity Act in one word, what word will it be?
Transformational.
Transformational. Yeah. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on your show, and for having me. Well, we hope you have enjoyed this episode. Do not forget to like, share, subscribe, leave your comments, leave your questions. And I remain your host, Ayomide Bello.